have been reports in Canadian media about gender selective abortions among women who were born in India. So Indian immigrant women have been having an unusually large number of boys as opposed to girls, and the reason for that is they get tests to figure out the gender of the baby, of the fetus, before they have the baby. And then if the fetus is a girl, if the fetus is a girl, then they have an abortion. And then they'll have abortion. If they find female fetuses, they'll abort them. And then if they have a male fetus, then they'll have the baby. So it's because they favor sons. And this has probably been reported several times, or a number of times before. And it doesn't just happen in Canada, but it happens in India, China, probably among certain immigrant populations in various other parts of the world, maybe in Britain or the United States, and so on. And so, probably this gender selective abortions probably skews the whole international world population, because India and China have the biggest populations in the world. Those are the two most populous countries in the world. China is the most populous, followed by India. So if you have a lot of people in those countries who are having gender selective abortions, then you're going to see a big surplus of boys over girls, or males over females. And if you look at the entire world population, that's what you would probably see. You would probably see more boys being born, or more young boys than girls, in the general world population. In China, first of all, the reason that people are having these gender selective abortions is that they favor boys over girls. The families feel that a male child is better than a female child. The male child will do more for the family than having a female child. And in China, I guess they used to have a one-child policy, which meant that every family could only have one child. So if they could only have one child, most of the families preferred to have a boy rather than a girl, because, like I said, they value boys more. So that's one of the reasons. So I guess you had in China, they had the gender selective abortions. Then you had also a lot of girls being put up for adoption. So if you look at China, especially in China, they had a lot of girls were put up for adoption, and you had a lot of Western people adopting these Chinese girls, and you rarely saw, there were rarely any, you didn't see boys being put up for adoption. You didn't see these Western families adopting Chinese boys, but you always saw them adopting Chinese girls, and that was because the family, or the parents or the families, if they had a female baby and they were only supposed to have one child, they didn't want the girl, so they would put the girl up for adoption, or send her to an orphanage or whatever, and then try to have a male child instead. And in India, they also have the gender selective abortions. Obviously, India doesn't have never had a one-child policy, but still, I guess the people who can afford to get have tests to figure out the gender of the fetus before their baby is born, they can afford to get an abortion, or get test the gender of the fetus, and then get an abortion if it's a girl. And then the same thing goes for the immigrants. When they come to immigrate to different countries, they still have the same cultural bias towards wanting male children rather than females. So then they get the abortions, or or they get the test to figure out the gender of the baby, then they get the abortion. And of course, in Western countries, abortions are, or, well, I guess most Western countries now, abortions are legal, and they don't want to put restrictions against abortions because it's women's rights and all that stuff, and so they don't want to make laws against abortions. So, and then if people have money, it's like they could probably, even if you try to make laws against it, they'll most likely find a way around it, find a way to sneak around it and get the gender test for the baby, and then, or for the fetus, and then get an abortion if it's a girl. Now, what are the effects of this? Well, the effects would be that, the effects are that you have a lot of really skewed gender ratios, where you have a lot of males, not a lot of females, and so you have a generation of young men who pretty much don't have many women available, and that may cause social problems in countries, especially in places like China, for example. It may cause social problems when you have a lot of males and they have no women available to them, or they have relatively few women available to them. And then as far as the Western countries, among the immigrants, it's not that as much of a problem, because the immigrants are it's a smaller percentage of the population that's doing it. Now, I think it may cause problems for the immigrant or the children of the immigrants, because it means that they're like, okay, for example, if you have an Indian family and they only want, their kids are only supposed to marry into a certain, they have very specific marriage rules. Because if you look at a lot of Indian people or South Asian people, they only want to marry, or their families only want them to marry certain people that fit into a very specific narrow range. So they want a partner the marriage partner is supposed to be the same caste, same ethnicity, same religion. So they have a relatively narrow pool of people to choose from. And I mean, I'm sure it may depend on the family too, whether they're more conservative or less conservative or whatever. But there's examples that I can think of among immigrant families from India who where there were objections, or sometimes they had honor killings for people in cases where they married somebody of the wrong caste, race, ethnicity, or whatever. So, for example, I think it was in Canada, there was a girl who, I think she married or she had a white boyfriend. The family didn't like it, and the family killed her. I think they killed her. Then there was another one who went to India, a Canadian girl with Indian parents from India. But I think she was either born in Canada or she grew up in Canada. Then she went back to India, and she met a guy who was the same ethnicity and the same religion as her, but a lower caste. And her family, of course, did not approve of this, and then they hired some hitmen to kill her. Or I think they killed her, the hitmen. And then there was another one in the United States, another family where they had a son who was, I think he married a black girl in the United States, and the family didn't approve of that, so then they hired hitmen, and they killed the girl. They killed the black girl who married their son. And then there was another case I heard of. This wasn't as dramatic, but it was South Asian Muslim person who married a girl of a Muslim girl from a Muslim Indian girl, but a different ethnicity, and he said that their families didn't approve of that because they were different ethnicities, even though they were in the same religion. So if you have all these really specific marriage requirements, then you have this gender selective abortion, and it's probably most common among the, let's say, the wealthier people, more privileged people, or higher caste people. Now there's going to be a shortage of suitable partners in, say, the higher caste, because if they're not supposed to marry a different race, not supposed to marry a different ethnicity, not supposed to marry a different religion, not supposed to marry a different caste, then they have limited options, because if you have a lot of people in their, say, their caste who are doing the gender selective abortions, and they just won't have a lot of partners to choose from. And they could go, so it's like they can't go to India and get a poor lower caste girl, because their family probably would not approve of that. And as far as in say Canada, or the countries where these immigrants go, what effect would it have here, or in Canada, or the United States, or the UK, or wherever Indian immigrant populations live? The effect that it would have is it will probably it would make Western cities a little bit more of a sausage fest, Oktoberfest, Wiener Festival, Oscar Mayer, nothing but penis, or too many men around and not enough women. So it could have a bit of a negative effect here, but not. It would have an effect, but at the same time, the Indian population are still not. They're not the entire population. So in Western countries, so maybe in some neighborhoods or whatever they are, but not in general. No, they're not. So I think it will have the biggest negative effect will be felt by the young men whose parents had those gender selective abortions, and then they won't be able to find partners that their families approve of.